The Midnight Spook Show was a type of style back in the days of the 30s and the 40s in movie theaters, where I will get to. However, there were lost things in the past, but now they came back with some stuff like Monsters Crash the Pajama Party, and it has clips of mostly something from the 1920s or a dancing skeleton. But it also has some other prized features in it as well that created that golden age back in those days of the 30s to the 40s. It got really popular over the years, and it really deserved the popularity that it does now. Most of the advertisements had talked about a lot of crazy things, and they ramped up everything just to get the popularity. It was done in total blackness during the kind of like theater palaces of the 1920s and created a big style. And this is the start of my HorrorVision. This was the first time you saw HorrorVision as a whole, and I'm surprised that I knew that it started it because it never existed. It never existed so anymore. But now that the 1960s were rolling around, people were not getting scared, and most people were doing this for cheap. So what else to do? They did try with drive-in movie theaters. However, that didn't come into effect because of the car lights on the stage. It didn't really help them out as much. And it certainly didn't help them out today. But there was thing that brought back that horror style, and it's been redone in haunted houses. That's right. Haunted houses have become the new mainstream midnight spook show. I'm surprised that they made them that way because if it wasn't for this uh, legendary horror fashion that we've seen before, we wouldn't have haunted houses like, today. The Midnight Spook Show, or Ghost Show as it originally known, was during the minus that we got some skeletons up there just watching a movie on the television. I invited them in. But yeah, it's a very nice style back in the days. They used these types of palace theaters to create a performance in the dark for many people's eyes. But by the time the modern age came around, television was becoming mainstream. Movie theaters were basically having no stages and basically having a big widescreen format with 3D elements being mixed in there. It disappeared after those times, and there still are some stuff, mostly radio broadcasts and advertisements that people are still looking at, and mostly a few clips like the dancing skeleton on heels and some old footage from the 1920s. I highly recommend to get both the Monsters Crash the Pajama Party DVD because it has a big collection of creeps back in the days of this one was in 1965, but it has a lot of good elements from the old days of the golden age of monster movies. And I also highly recommend the book, which I am going to take a look at here. In fact, it's very tricky, but I think it's called Ghostmasters by Mark Walker. And that book is, if you can find it in a good price, I highly recommend you take it and read it. I don't have it. I mean, again, I've showed you before. I've only got these books like Coraline, which I will get to the movies someday to this month. But yeah, it's a very classic one, and it started the haunted house craze my childhood, and probably your childhood have been used to. And maybe that's how we're getting interested in the Midnight Spook Show. It was the haunted houses that did that, not anything else out of the ordinary. And I have that to thank. I really did like it. And to those people who made these types of styles of horror in movie theaters, I thank you. The only way to recreate it is we gotta see an old movie theater from the 20s that still is in good condition, at least fairly, has all the equipment that we can use, and has a stage. So at least we can bring back that original feel. Like I said, drive-in movie theaters were supposed to work, but with the advent of cars and headlights on the cars, it just didn't feel right. It didn't feel right, and it didn't create a spooky atmosphere as many of us would know. But I'll tell you, the haunted houses did, and it's a big, great attractions that are still around to this very date. Haunted houses have become very popular, and I highly recommend you do some haunted houses, but I highly recommend anybody recreating that old style from the 30s called the Midnight Spook Show. Because it's a very classic style that I think it should return in some fashion. But I'll be looking at a fashion that Stephen King, John Carpenter, and George A. Romero and Tom Savini have created in the 80s that actually has at least segments of stories, and I'll get to that tomorrow.